My premise is basically that human contact is the killer app, and that even though we're building apps to do just about anything, that we somehow lose track, especially as entrepreneurs and when we're starting to build businesses, of when we need to take it and actually have that personal contact. And how do we do that? How do you prepare for that? I think it is not true that many entrepreneurs are extroverts. I'm actually an introvert, and we have to learn how to do that. I think all of us sometimes would rather sit on the couch and drink a glass of wine and watch a movie or play a video game. So how do we kind of get ourselves into a different mode? And I think that also we've kind of gotten to a point where, I laugh when people talk about the internet or online, or God forbid we should say World Wide Web. I'd love to say that just as a joke, because we don't even think about it. It's just so pervasive, except on Air Canada. From Vancouver to here, there is no wireless, but everywhere else, it's pretty much pervasive. And they tell me it's coming soon. And so, we respond all the time to digital signals, and we've gotten so used to that. And if we think about it, what are the signals we look at all the time? I know for me, in any given day, what are you looking for constantly? Do I have signal? What else? What else are you constantly looking for? What's the speed, right? What's the performance? What else? What are your digital signals that you're looking for all the time? Do you have email? Good one. What else? Come on. Text. Speed, right? How many of you are constantly going, why is this so fucking slow? What is going on? Yes, thank you. Okay. Battery life. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't think of that one before. Constantly, especially if you have an iPhone, right? It's gotten better, but we won't talk about phones because everyone makes fun of my phone. I used to work at Microsoft, so that'll give you a clue of what phone I have still. It's retro. It's so fucking cool. It's like the old Zunes. You don't even know what a Zune is, do you? What else? I have an iPod now, just for the record. I'm not that old. What else? These are good ones. Okay, so those are the digital signals we look at. So if we spend our whole day looking at that, why are you here? Because most people that are doing what you're doing never come to one of these, right? They think they can do all of this from the safety of their couch and their computer. So we know that we have to get out there. We have to have that human interaction. And I just love this slide. I don't know what it has to do with this, other than the fact if somebody let go, they'd all be dead. So maybe that's why. So what does that mean for startups? This is what I really want to talk about. Is that so for all of us that are trying to build businesses, what does it mean to have human contact? And what it means is we have to look for the human signals. We need to move beyond the digital signals. So I'm going to ask you now about human signals. I'll start you at. So eye contact. What are the other human signals that we have to find? That's a great one. Body language. Whoa, dude. Okay, body language is a good one. Speech. That's really important. I was just talking to a young woman this morning, and we were talking about how so many women, when they speak, end every sentence going up, and how that actually takes away their credibility. And there's a lot of young men that are doing it now, too. So every sentence you'll say, oh, so we're going to build this app? Is that a question? I think we're going to be really successful. And if you're giving your 30-second elevator pitch and every sentence that you do, you're going up, that's a great one. So tone of voice, your pitch, what else? What are other signals we look at when we're meeting with people? Touch. I was just thinking, that kind of puts the whole venture capital thing in a new thing. So, what are you building? How much would you be willing to invest in my business? What else? I know I had other ones, but now I've totally lost track. Yes, sir. Oh, that's good. Empathy or chemistry. Way to move me off sex. That's a good one. Empathy? Energy. That's a good one. I hadn't thought about that one. So what are people giving off? What is the energy level? That's right. If you're like, so we're going to build this business. It's going to be really great. Anything else? What else do you look for? Compassion. Yes, ma'am. Confidence. Your posture. How are you holding yourself? These are awesome. Okay, so when do we need these human signals? So let's go through. There's a bunch of things, and I just kind of want to walk through each one and throw out your ideas, ask your questions, and we go through those. So the first one is networking. So we talked about this morning, that it is still who you know. So I'll tell you that on my latest journey, before I went with my latest adventure with this startup, I spent several months meeting with people, and I had the opportunity through a friend to meet with a venture capitalist in Boulder, Colorado, who is known as being a pretty cool guy, pretty connected, and that like to get time with him is really hard. And so I got 30 minutes with this VC in Boulder, Colorado. I live in Seattle, which is not a drive away. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take that 30 minutes. So I booked a flight. I got in the night before, and I worked from the hotel during the day to have this 30 minutes. And from that 30 minutes, I ended up with 15 different companies and contacts and other VCs that I met with in Seattle and Portland and Silicon Valley. And so even though it was a flight to Boulder and it was a hotel and it was 2 days away from work, whatever it was, that was worth it. And so the question is, are you willing to invest in that kind of time, even money, travel, to go meet with one person for a 30-minute meeting, not knowing if you'll get anything out of it or if he'll cancel at the last minute? And the answer is you should absolutely be doing that. And if you can do that every single fucking week, just because it's a chance of meeting a venture capitalist or a potential leader or a company that might partner with you or a company that might invest, then you should be doing that, right? And I think so often we are afraid to ask. And that's the other thing I see, is that with so many entrepreneurs or even young companies, they just don't ask. And very rarely, and I can speak for myself and I'm sure other people in this room can speak for themselves as well, is that rarely does someone say no, flat out. I mean, sometimes they might say, oh, I'm be traveling, I don't have time for the next 30 days. But has anyone ever said flat out no to you? No. Would you ever say no to someone if they said, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time because I want to learn what you did? So, and yet we don't ask. So the number one thing you can take away from this is ask the question. Ask to meet with them. Ask for their time. Because most people, I don't care how busy you are, I don't care if you're Dave McClure, he'd say, yeah, fucking yeah, I'll meet with you and buy you a fucking beer. Then we'll go out to the fucking walk. And then, no, just kidding. Sorry. He's the only person I know in the entire world that swears more than I do. Okay, so I'm doing the big green button. There we go. Whoops. No, I did it too far. Product validation. So this is the other time we have got to get out and meet with people. And this, what I would say, is the stage that so many companies don't do. So in past lives, I've run product management, in addition to running companies. And so often we build something, we start going to market, we get money, we put it out there, and nobody fucking likes it, or they don't even know how to use it, or maybe it's a nice to have, but it's not a must have, right? And there's nothing worse than the death of a company when a product is, oh, that's interesting, right? You need it to be part of their daily flow. So how do you make sure it's a must have? You go out in the earliest stage you can and have people hammer on it and go out and meet with every single person that you think is your target audience. And I'll tell you, in my current company, we started with a totally different premise. And we went out to people and said, oh, we've got this great idea about competitive pricing, and we'll scrape all the the pages of your competitors' websites, and when they change pricing, we'll send you an alert. They're like, that's interesting. Okay, well, where is your real pain? They're like, what we really need competitively is to know when our competitors do X, Y, Z. I was like, okay, back to the drawing board. That was not what we thought. And so those pivots are critical, and you're never going to know if you need to pivot or don't need to pivot if you're not in their face saying, is this interesting? Would you use it? Play with it. Let me watch you. If you have any, I don't care how rough it is, you could have screenshots, you could have a PowerPoint, you could have a premise. But before you start going to get money, before you start going down that whole road and get everything set, go out and whoever you think your target market is, go test it and get out there and validate your product. And this is early stage. If any of you have participated in startup weekends, one of the major questions we ask them, and they've only had 48 hours to put this together, is how have you validated this? And I'll tell you, every single time, the company that has won is one that said, they'll have an app, I don't know, that's a reservation system. Well, we went to 30 restaurants nearby, and we asked them how much they would spend for this, and we had them play with it, and we asked what they would need to do, blah, blah, blah. So even if there's too many apps out there that reserve tables for restaurants, they've already risen to the top of our attention span, right? Because they actually took the time to go out and do the scariest thing in the world, which is validate. There was this great article from this guy who was doing a wedding application, like how to help people plan their weddings and all this. And he was sitting there at a coffee shop, very early stage of his business, kind of idea stage. He'd done a little bit of coding. And there was this young couple next to him, and they started fighting over their wedding plan. I bet that never happens, but it did in this case. And so they're fighting over their wedding plan, and he was sitting there at the table next to them, absolutely frozen. Oh, I should so get up and talk to them. I should talk to them. I should ask them if they would use this app. No, can't do it. Can't talk to them. They're fighting. Nope, I should get up and talk to them. And he was absolutely paralyzed with fear. And finally he got up and he said, I'm so sorry. could I interrupt you guys? I'm actually trying to build this company and this product, which is helping people with their wedding planning. Could you tell me what you think? And the good news is it totally removed, they forgot where they were fighting. So that was good. He could probably go into marriage counseling if the app doesn't work out. But he actually asked them, and they had some really good feedback. Like, oh, that's interesting. Well, why didn't you do this? And he was like, wow. And then he was like, okay, I can do this. But I loved his blog because you could just feel the absolute fear in him. And if any of you have tried to do that, it is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying, but it's so important. Anything else about product validation? Any stories that anyone wants to share? Any examples? Should have brought some beer up. That's what that tells me. Manufacturing. So I lived in Greater China for 10 years. And I used to love hearing the horror stories, usually American companies, so I don't know if Canadians are smarter or what, but they would do an entire contract with the Taiwanese OEM, and the only time they'd come over is all of a sudden when they're actually on the manufacturing line. So the shit is going through the line, and they'd go, oh, wow, no, that wasn't actually, what are you doing with that integrated circuit? So when's another time? It's like before you ever get there, make sure that you know your manufacturing, especially if you're doing overseas. Don't take the word of the broker. So manufacturing is another time where you absolutely have to go out there, meet the people that are doing it. And especially, obviously, this is more of a hardware aspect. But, people do it with, they get freelance coders and they don't meet them, right? I mean, it can be any part of that production process. Partnerships. This is another, maybe it seems obvious that we should meet our partners. But again, how many times do you think that this company that you've met or that you've worked with is like the perfect match for you? And you don't take the time to do the due diligence. You don't take the time to find out, are your ethic bars even the same, right? Do they operate the same way that you do? Is their compensation model the same way as you? So it's not only the stuff you can research online, but it's how do you meet with them and how do you figure things out? Banking. It's interesting. We talk so much about venture capital, and so few small companies look at all the options they have of establishing a relationship with a local bank and actually having a relationship. And while we do so much banking personally online and even with our companies, there are still a lot of banks that are very aggressively trying to go after the small business market and helping them finance, helping them get some debt. And so establishing a relationship with a local banker, and some of them do it for certain industries, certain niches. So maybe this seems obvious, but I think there's a whole bunch of capital out there we totally ignore. And when credit was really tight, a few years ago, and banks were terrified of doing this, but I think I'm seeing a lot of capital open up, especially where I'm from in Seattle, and a lot of opportunity to develop those relationships, especially locally. So investors, again, we email them or we try to establish these relationships without getting in their face. And we come to things like this and hoping that we meet all the VCs that we need to meet in one place so that we can get the money we need. And that's not going to do it. So you've really got to find out, get more contacts. If you do happen to bump into a VC here and he's willing to give you contacts, take everything he's willing to give, but you've got to use your entire network and get in their face and try to get in front of them. And they're pounded with how many hundreds of thousands of business plans and pitches every single day. So what are you going to do to stand out? Figure out a way to get in their face and ask their advice. Hiring. So this is the most maybe important thing when it comes to once you start building out your team. And I see so many early stage startups make mistakes or fuck up here with some key roles. Beyond the founders, those first 1, 2, 3 people you hire are critical. They can make or break your company. And so often we're so concerned with cash flow that we'll hire really junior tactical people, or we'll think, oh, I need to bring in, some VP from Microsoft because he knows what he's doing and he forgets how to roll up his sleeves and do work. So who you bring in those early jobs is critical. And I can tell you, I have seen, I can't even count the number of times I've seen startups hire the wrong people. And that balance of strategy and tacticalness in a role is so critical. And with developers, I think it's probably the most obvious, but it can cross everything from product management, from marketing, from your executive assistant, depending on how big you are. And with development, the answer is, do I get a rock star, give them lots of equity, get somebody in? Because it's amazing how some companies can build something with 4 people and some other company needs 20. Why is that, right? So you've got to figure out what's going to make them tick. And for most people, they want a piece of the action, right? They want to feel like they're part of building the business. So you've got to think about, what am I willing to give up to get the right people? Because those first 5, 10, 20 employees can be the difference between making it or breaking it. And then as you grow, this is actually my company now, our big team. We actually moved into an office about 3 weeks ago. It's pretty exciting. We were working remotely and from coffee shops before. Probably all of you have done that. But employee relations, so at what point do you actually need to start communicating, more organizationally with your employees? And how do you do that? And it's amazing how quickly that happens. So John is one of our founders and CEO. And it's interesting how, as founders, you start to need to establish roles as you bring in other people. And even with 10 people, all of a sudden, does CEO need to have some formal communication? Do we have a company meeting now once a month? I mean, those seem like stupid questions, but it's amazing how that personal contact, as you bring in non-founders and how they look at the different roles, especially the CEO, makes a huge difference. So when you're hiring people, and then how you deal with them as you move forward. Absolutely. So he said it's easier to fuck up over time. So I can tell you that, I have worked with many CEOs, and one of the number one things I work with them on is communications, both internally and externally. And somehow we think that if someone has become a CEO, they magically know how to use messaging and tell their story and have this amazing vision. And I would say, 8 out of 10 do not. And so if that is not your skill set and you're a CEO and you see your company building, go get some help, right? Because there's nothing worse than sitting in front of even 25 people and not being able to communicate that vision, because those employees are going to be like, why the hell am I with this person? I don't, he's not even compelling to me, right? And that's just part of the job. And if you can't do it, then find someone who can. But the CEO, that's kind of your job, right? And your board's going to want to see it, your investors are going to want to see it, the press is going to want to see it, and on and on and on. And you're absolutely right, it gets harder. Customer support. How many people have done customer support? Yeah. How many people have been CEOs and have done customer support? So yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I mean, this is typical startup, right? It's like I was trying to watch the sessions, and all of a sudden I was watching our hip chat light up on our customer support thing. It's like, okay, everybody does customer support when you have 10 people at a company. And so with customer support, when is it okay to be online? You've got a great FAQ, you do great email. But sometimes, especially small, if it's between converting that person and not, if you've got any kind of free trial or anything like that, you pick up the phone. And these people freak out. It's like you call, hey, I'm Margaret from Rival IQ. I just thought I'd give you a call and see what was happening. It seemed like you had a problem. They're like, wait, you're calling me on the phone? It's like nobody calls anybody anymore. So the magic you can provide with that personal contact, or even just a personal email instead of one that's automated from your product, where you just said, hey, just thought I'd shoot you an email. And there's actually technologies that are pretty cool, like Intercom, where you can make it sound personal, even if it's not. And people believe that. It's like, hey, just thought I'd help you. They're like, wow, thanks, Margaret. It's like, I'm like, oh, right, I sent you an email. Have to remember that. But, I think we forget how powerful it is. I mean, how many of you have gone online and you're trying to find customer support? I mean, think of a million different products. I was just having one the other day where I was trying to find, okay, how do I email you? Oh, Shutterstock. I was looking for an image, and they had no phone number, and nobody was answering their chat. I mean, you talk about, I literally said, okay, forget it. I'll go find it. I'll just, grab a Google image or something that hopefully isn't going to have malware in it. So that personal touch, that ability to respond, and it's hard because you're 24/7, and maybe there's 4 of you. And maybe you've already gone global, but you've got to figure out how to do that, because that can make or break it right away. And it's amazing how people respond to personal contact with a company. It's amazing. And we've gotten so used to not being absolutely ignored or being on one of those phone systems where you've got to push 10 digits, that actually having a person you can talk to is amazing, the loyalty that it brings. Product walkthroughs. This has been a personal bailiwick of mine, and something very recent, in that we built this great product, what we thought was great, and then we weren't seeing the conversion rates early on. And so I started bringing in, so our market is to marketing people or marketing specialists. So I brought in just about 5 people in a row this one week, and they would set up from the beginning our product in front of the development team. Well, there's 10 of us, so in front of the entire company. And it's the most painful thing in the world to watch someone go through your product and be like, oh, so, okay, what am I supposed to do now? And of course the engineers are like, the red button, push the red button! And they're like, there's a red button? and they're doing this, and you're just like, and the engineers are literally killing themselves. They want to like jump over, grab the person's hand. They're just like, what is wrong with these people? Marketing people are obviously fucking dumb. How can they not see this red button? But then the second person comes in and does the same thing. So what am I supposed to do now? Right? And so by the third time this has happened, the engineer's like, okay, so I think we need to remove that button, like maybe, right? And so then you do it again and again and again. And it's literally weary. I mean, it is so hard to watch because it is your baby, right? And you think, we've done UX studies. We know about user interface. But making sure, like we talked about this morning, not drinking your own Kool-Aid, like bring those people in and watch them use your product from the beginning. And don't lead the witness. We've got one guy in our company who's always like, so if this was blue and bolded, would you push it then? It's like, just let them go through the product. So, and do this over and over again. Every time you do a new feature, before you go live, actually test it. And once you get customers, bring them in to walk through it and just live through that pain and listen to them. Because chances are, if you've got your target market right, and those are customers that are actually buying what you've built, listen to them. So often we think we're smarter than our customers, but chances are they're actually using this for a purpose. Customer and partner councils. As you get bigger, and we're all going to assume that we're going to get bigger here, we actually can formalize that. And so we have a small group of customers now, about 20, that we can actually send stuff on staging. We have kind of a private area, and they just like hammer away at it and almost like do bug fixing for us. It's awesome. It's like free, bug fixing. But they love it, and there's this incredible loyalty. And it's that same thing about not asking. You'd assume it's like, well, why would my customer who's paying me help me like pound on new features that aren't even in the product yet and that are maybe broken? But if you don't ask, you don't know. And what we found out is if you ask, and this is not just this company, I've done this before, it's like they actually do it, and they actually feel now responsible for your success. I mean, how awesome is it if you have a group of customers that actually feel like they have something at stake with your success? And if it works out and they give referrals, then figure out some way to reward them. Okay, for every referral, you get 5% off the next month. I don't know, come up with some program to then make it monetarily worth their while. But it's amazing how you can build loyalty. And we're actually not, some people give them swag. What we're actually sending them are books about the industry, or we send them things that are relevant. We give them free passes to conferences. So we're making it relevant to the business as opposed to, oh, here's a cool USB drive or something that's not relevant. Has anyone else done partner customer councils? One person. Successful? Yeah? How many people did you have on your council? Interesting. So he actually broke it into verticals. So it wasn't just one. He actually did vertical specific. And you mentioned it. How many people did you have on your council? About 10 people. And it was all same, like mix of industries, or what was their... Oh, interesting. Okay, so she chose different roles. So that's actually a really good point, because rarely does a product sell to just one role in a company. And so think about, do you have different ways of reaching out to the different roles, or what some people love to call personas within your target market? Because they may have very different ways of looking at things or different advice that they would give you. So maybe you have a senior counsel and you have kind of people that are doing the day-to-day work. And I think with this is, a lot of us go out, we'll do market research, we'll do customer surveys. And again, we're relying on all this data, but there's nothing better than actually getting in front of these people and having that interaction and finding out what they would say when they're actually with other people. Board meetings. So maybe this seems obvious that these should be in person, but I do see a lot of startups trying to do virtual board meetings. And I think there's a couple things from that. So being on a board, I would say a lot of young companies want to do virtual ones because then you can't see their face and know they're full of shit when they're telling you something about their revenue numbers. But there's also something very collaborative about it. And hopefully, as you are building out your board and growing as a company, you're actually establishing relationships of trust with those people. I mean, those should be your senior advisors. I think there's this weird thing that we think that our board members somehow are supposed to be like our parents or some adversarial relationship. And my experience has been they can be your greatest advocates, they're your greatest champions, and they're frickin' smart people that hopefully have been through this a few times. And so you can learn from that a lot. So use them as that. Don't shy away from that. Don't see them as something on the outside. Bring them in and actually use them to build out that strategy. They shouldn't just be writing checks. A lot of them are actually very willing to be engaged. And I'm not talking about micromanaging, but leveraging their experience across a lot of companies. And so often we're afraid to do that. So analysts and press. This is interesting because I talk to a lot of people who think that PR is not necessary or it's dead and why do I do AR? And this is different, depending if you're B2C or B2B and what kind of industry you're doing. If you're in, enterprise tech, then analysts are a necessary part of doing business. And I think this goes back to, going sometimes to these shows, going sometime to these analyst things, doing these in-person briefings. I will tell you, I have gotten more things for free or goodwill from just sitting down and having a beer with an analyst or, meeting a press person at an event, but actually having a conversation with them. And so often we're terrified of this because you're afraid to get bad press or you're afraid to, go off message or whatever. So I would say make sure you're prepared for this, but the more you get in front of these people and the more you have a relationship with, these last forever. You think about organizations like GeekWire or TechCrunch or some of these other kind of, journalistic, but they also have all these connections in the industry. One of those articles can drive more traffic to your website than almost anything else. So we somehow think of PR as being this kind of fluffy, I'll do an interview or I'll do a press release, but it's really moved way beyond that. So think about how you can leverage that not only in digital communication, but in face-to-face communication and getting in front of these people. So demand generation. So how many people think that events for demand gen are a waste of time and money? Nobody, wow. Usually I get like half a room. So events. So a live event like this for lead generation, demand generation. So getting leads, getting prospective customers. That it doesn't? That it does work. So I've worked with a lot of companies that say, events are stupid. We're not putting any money in events. And all their lead generation, and this is, you could say, we're an online product, so why would I want to go to an event to get leads? They just come to our website and they convert. It's magical. But what's interesting is that even though we've become more digital than ever, there are still niche events that, there's a couple things. One, if you're not there, people assume you don't exist, which is interesting. But there's also a lot of validity there. If you can do a niche event, you can get enough leads that will actually, build up your revenue and help you meet your numbers. And I think we're too quick to say, they're too expensive, or, events don't work to gather leads or whatever. But again, look at a very niche event, find something that's affordable, and, make sure it's very targeted to the customers that you're going after. So don't be afraid to do something in person and live. And if you can't afford to sponsor it, try to get a speaking gig. Right? If you've got someone in your company or yourself and you have something to say, you're not going to go and pitch your product, but if you've got something to say that's a thought leadership topic, start there and then just build out and see if that's the right audience. M&A, this is probably obvious, I just like this cartoon, but I think so often we think that we're going to build up our company to a certain point and then someone's just going to call and say, I want to buy your company for billions of dollars. It could happen, okay, I think that might have happened once, but for most of us, it is a painful, long process. And I will tell you that once you start down this path, it's usually not even one company. I'm sure many of you have been through this process more than once, yes? Raising hands, a few. One? Wow. Okay, so for those of you who've never been through this process, if you are lucky enough to even get to this stage, it is fucking hell. Because chances are you're going to be talking to multiple companies, and it's a whole lot of due diligence. And if you're the CEO or one of the senior executives at that company, your life is absorbed by this for weeks and weeks on end. And it is very, very hard. And you rarely get the valuation that you want. And your board is involved, so just be prepared. You talk about in person. And, I've worked for companies that we were acquired, and the CEO attempted to manage the whole thing and buffer the entire company from the process. I'm sure you've heard of this. It's like, okay, I don't want to tell the company this is happening because then they'll all stop working. And they'll all think they're going to be millionaires next week. The problem is if you don't tell even, your senior leadership team, it's absolute chaos because you can't do it all yourself. Make sure that you're being smart about how you manage that. So the main message that I'm trying to make here is get out. So you're here, so you've already started doing that. But in some ways, this is easy because you're anonymous, right? You don't have to network. You don't even have to look at me in the eye if you don't want to, although most of you are, so thank you. But you've just got to get out. And it's hard, and it's really scary, like I said. And the worst thing is it makes you vulnerable that someone will disagree with you or say no. So quickly, I'm going to go through some prep, and then we're going to get back on schedule here because, it's just amazing that the VCs didn't know how to stop talking. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't know. I made the observation this morning that there is a direct correlation between people in startups and the F word, and now I found out there's a direct correlation between venture capitalists and those who start accelerators and the inability to stop talking. So practice. This is very important. I mean, how many people would, go to give a major speech and never practice, never go through their materials, never get ready? How many of you would prepare, not prepare for a test or your SAT or whatever it is in Canada where you do your major exam, right? I mean, some people would and they'd wing it and maybe they do okay, but for most of us it doesn't work that way. We're not that good. So to think that you can go out and meet with these, whether it be a press or a venture capitalist or whatever, I mean, how many of those 30-second elevator speeches did we see where they went, okay, my company, we're building an app, and it's like, for the love of God, how hard is it to practice 30 seconds over and over and over again until you have it in your fucking sleep, right? Practice that elevator speech until you know it by heart. Give it to your mother, right? She won't know what you're talking about, but give it to her because she'll smile at you the whole time. Or she'll say, and you didn't want to be a doctor, why? Practice, practice, practice. Test it on friendlies. And this is true whether it's your product, and you're scared to do a walkthrough, find someone that's nice to you and say, oh, this is good, because they'll be a little bit more gentle than someone who's coming out from the cold. So find some friendlies and test it on them. Same thing with VCs. If you've got a VC friend or somebody that's in the industry, show them your business plan, test it out on them, get their feedback before you go into the wolf den. Don't stop after no. You're going to get many no's. You're going to get many people that say that's a stupid idea. So one, make sure they're relevant to your business because a lot of people will tell you it's a stupid idea and they have no idea what you're building and they're not your target market. So be very careful, right? But don't take no. But make sure that if you are talking to people that are your customers or you're talking to VCs that are your target and they keep saying, this isn't quite right, then you need to figure out how to pivot. But don't just give up when you get a no. And be agile. I'm a big agile proponent, both on the development side, the marketing side, just kind of life. And so, get something that's good enough, get it out there, test it, play with it, measure it, make some changes, go again. It doesn't need to be perfect. I think too often we're so afraid to get a product out there before it's perfect. One of the best examples is Paul Allen started a company, and he's great at investing. He's done wonderful things for Seattle. But they were building this, what was then a smartphone. It was like an Uber smartphone. And at the time this product was being developed was early in the smartphone stage. But the development team, he hired these rocket scientists, and they were so afraid to put it out in the market. So for 5 years, think about how long that is in smartphone years. They didn't put a product out. So by the time it got out, it had every fucking bell and whistle that you could imagine, and it was obsolete the day it went to market. Right? Now, if they'd gone out that first year with an okay product, just think what they could have done within those 5 years. So don't wait for it to be perfect. Get it good enough. Go hammer the shit out of it with people that you think are interested. Make iterative changes. Get it out there again. And maybe do it free for the first 6 months, whatever it takes. But don't wait to make it perfect. We think that we have to make this a certain, level of perfection, and that just isn't going to be it. I just put this one in because people don't wear the right clothes and it bugs the shit out of me, but I'm old, so maybe it's just me. But it's like, I always say dress like you want to become, not what you are. And I think there is something to say for that. And I think that we've taken this tech culture a little bit too far. And when we show up at a VC in flip-flops and shorts, I just want to smack people upside the head. But so I think there's something to say to that. At least we're designer jeans and really nice flip-flops, I guess, if that's what you're going to be. But I think that we have lost the art of dressing for a role. And I think if you want to be taken seriously, then show them you're serious. And dress is part of that. And someone said smile. It's amazing. Like, are you enjoying what you're doing? No, I'm miserable. I'm building a startup, right? But smile anyway. Right? It makes a big difference. And your confidence level, like all of a sudden you stand up straighter, right? It's amazing how smiling can make a difference. And I don't care what anyone says, that is global. That is worldwide. I have never had smiling at anyone fail. In fact, when I lived in Taiwan and I had to go get my visa renewed, smiling helped a lot. And wearing pink and speaking really sweet Chinese. But smiling helped a lot. And if you can't do those things, then hire someone or partner with someone or get your partner to do it. And you be the behind the scenes person. So know what your right fit is and have people that you do business with that can play that role. Because if nobody plays it, you're never going to go anywhere. And my favorite thing to say is always be you. because you can do all these things, other than if you dress crappy, then don't be you. Dress nicely and then be you. But you need to be true to who you are. And, investors see that, employees see that, partners see that, and everybody's talked about this in the keynotes the last 2 days. If you've heard nothing else, you've heard do something that you are passionate about. And I can say that in all the businesses that I've worked with and for, if I don't believe in what we're building or what we're selling, I can't do it. Some people can, but the difference, if you really believe that you're building something that's going to make a difference, no matter how small or big it is, it's amazing how that shows and how that changes your success. So this is my email, and I think we're back on time.